PFL's got something here. And there is a question of what? So, I watched the pay-per-view over the weekend. The production was different. You could see it. You could see that there was a reveal. If you'll recall, when WME bought the UFC from Zuffa, their very next show, there was something different. It was small. They had bought a graphics package that probably cost them $250,000. It was just fantastically done, but it was still different nonetheless. And when they faded to black and went to credits, there was a different way that they did the credits. Just for example, it was slight, it was small, but it existed, and a new company is there. The PFL did the same thing. There was a new production. The way that the arena was built out and the look of the show was different in a very positive way. But what do you have and what are you trying to do? And I would not expect that I'm going to be given those answers. I would not expect, like Don Davis and Peter Murray do not owe us those answers. You just get curious, do they have them? What is it they've got and what is it that they plan to do in terms of the vision? Not for one night. What is the vision? And PFL has distinguished itself, and it did it early. PFL, as a matter of fact, did a better job than anybody aside from the UFC. They did a better job than Pride. They did a better job than Strikeforce, WEC, just for example. They did a better job of establishing who they are and what they are and making sure that they were something else than any other MMA promotion who is just also doing MMA. If you love MMA, we do it over here too. But they're now in this transition, and I am highly curious. For example, you will hear promoters come out and tell you, we have the best fighters. That's a really big deal to a lot of promoters. Now, that doesn't matter, not even a tiny bit. I, who analyze things like this, am always going to wonder when I hear those words, do you know that that doesn't matter, not even a tiny little bit? If I know that you know, go ahead and say your piece about what great fighters you have. But I do like we have the best. You always hear we have the best fighters. You'll always hear that. And then there'll even be a debate. Now, there's no way to figure out that debate. It is just perception. The Ultimate Fighting Championship has won that perception. For example, but many times when that has been put to the test, they didn't win the head-to-head matchups. Many times. Had a Bellator champion come over and run ragshot over there all the way to the title. His name's Eddie Alvarez. We're told and it's believed by many that the greatest heavyweight in the world right now is Francis Ngannou, who was the combat champion and should be the boxing champion simultaneously. But there's not an opponent for him. There's not a draw for him. We're told that the biggest draw right now is a guy that's never done it named Jake Paul. I don't know that I disagree. So what I'm sharing with you, right? Justin Gaethje used to be with the PFL. It was called World Series of Fighting. But Justin Gaethje is not a step better today than he was then. So I'm just saying they had the best fighter. I'm attempting to prove the best fighter is not important, and that's okay. As long as it's something that you just say, there's no issue here. I just have to wonder when you say it, are you really just saying it, or do you actually think that it matters? The right guy will always show up. Not sometime, every time, 100%. There has never been an NCAA finals on TV for any sport in the world where a group of buddies are sitting around watching it and one of them slaps the other one on the leg and says, I could have done this, I just sat the NCAA out this year. It has never happened. The gold medal match in the Olympics has never happened. The medal stand and the ceremony and the flag coming up and the national anthem for whatever the victor's country is, and somebody told his buddy, I could have done this, I sat this Olympics out. It has never happened. The right guy will always come forward. It could be anything. You could be doing the chess world championships. It could be anything. The right guy will always come forward. You can't say that about 8, 9, 10, 7, 6. Most times, but not all the time. All the time, the right guy will come forward. So if you have created an atmosphere that has a tournament, that has a competitive architecture, the only way to possibly know who is actually the best is to have a competitive architecture, which is why in combat, we don't know, which is where the perception is so important. Whoever has the perception of now wins that game. And I like the beginning part of the statement. I like the we have the best. But it doesn't need to end with fighter. Let me give you an example. Would you rather have the best fight? You're a promoter, we got a magic wand. We're going to hand it to you, right? We're going to hand you, would you rather have the two best guys fighting? So now you've got the best fighter, and that is the most important. Yeah, I heard you say that 5 times. Would you rather have that, or would you rather have the best fight? Which one are you going to go make money with? Which one are you going to fill the house? Which one are you going to get sponsors? Which one are you going to expect eyeballs? Would you rather have the best fighters? The two best on all of God's earth, whether you've even heard of them or not, you're going to get the two best, most skilled guys. Or would you rather have the best fight? Now, let me ask you another question. Would you rather have the best fighter? Or would you rather have the best finish? You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who the best fighter is. God himself has this magic, and he's going to hand it to you if you say that's what you want. Or he's going to hand you the best finish. So you can have the best fighter, or you can have the best knockout. And maybe the answer is not quite as clear, but I'm just asking you, which would you rather have? You can have the best fighter, or you can have the best submission. So once we establish that Francis is the best fighter, if that's what we choose to do, once we understand that Justin Gaethje, who is a reigning champion, was just as good back then. He is not one step better today than he was then. And by the way, he was their champion. So once we do a good job of establishing that it's not fighter and it never has been fighter, ever, what do we do with that? What do we do? Because you can't concede the point. Right? The laws of logic will tell you, if I'm right and I'm telling you you don't need the best fighter, okay, great, then stop saying you're the best fighter. Say you have the best production, right? No, you need to stick with the fight. Like, that's got to be a narrative, but it's a narrative that you must know can never be proven, and it's based upon perception. And because it's based on perception, they can't prove it any more than you can prove it. Because of that, how are you going to beat them and where are you going to beat them? Many times it has been tested that we're going to outspend them. If I want a better production than you have and I find out your production's $1 million, all I have to do is put up $1,250,000. I'll do another 25% on what you're spending. This theory has been tested inside and out. Whatever candidate I'm going to hedge and put my bet on so that down the road I can get a favor come back to me is whichever candidate has raised the most money, because that's who's going to win. Like, this theory has been tested to nauseum. It's been tested in chess. Here's a sport you guys probably don't follow, but if you know the history of bodybuilding, it was tested over and over with guys with more money, and it's not who was left standing. It was tested just recently in football by a company called the XFL. I mean, just to give you a recent example, that you're not going to throw money at it to solve the problem. And if you're attempting to throw money at something because you're attempting to have the best fighter is not what's important. You've had them before. And best fighter does not trump the best fight. And best fighter or highest paid does not trump the most popular, the most sought after, the most marketed. doesn't trump any of those things. There hasn't been, just to really knock this point home, there has not been a UFC, there has not been a Bellator, there has not been a PFL, there has not been any MMA show, as a matter of fact, that has ever done more viewers than The Ultimate Fighter. And those fighters that were there were paid $0 just to prove my point. But that did come with the best story. Not something that somebody would generally go out there and brag about. Now, when I tell you that I've never seen a time where people have thrown money at something to get over, I have seen the opposite, and I saw the opposite win. Whenever you're trying to make your moves, you always want to look back at something in history, and then that's the one that you want to study. But one of the great promoters, one of the great businessmen that you guys have ever had brought to your attention is Vincent Kennedy McMahon, who out of nowhere, expecting no competition, gets taken on by a billionaire named Ted Turner. And Ted Turner didn't know how to do it on his own. Very few do. It is the true art. Very few do know how to do it on their own. So Ted bought Vince's talent. What Vince has spent 15 and 20 years building, and I mean, he bought them all. He bought Hulk Hogan. He bought Diesel. He bought Razor. He bought the Macho Man, for that matter. He got them all. He took his referees. He took his writers. He took his cameramen. Things about the wrestling show that you've never tuned in for or never known that you tuned in for, not just the honor talent. He bought all the talent. Vince was left with nothing. He bought the excellence of execution. He went and got them all. He overspent. He paid more than Vince was willing to spend. Vince wanted to keep them. He could not afford to keep them. Vince let them go. Now, Vince couldn't afford to keep them, not because Vince didn't have the money or he couldn't get access to the money. From understanding the business and knowing what is more than market value and knowing what he's willing to pay because it's the right thing to do for my business, that's where Vince didn't have the money. Don't ever misunderstand that story as though Ted Turner had access to or could outspend Vince. When Vince says I didn't have the money to keep Bret Hart, I didn't have the money in my mind and heart to justify him getting $3 million a year. Not I didn't have $3 million a year. Make sure you don't misunderstand that. So they left. I'm talking about writers. Ted Turner bought 4 people of the 6 people from the catering department at WWE. He bought them all. And he did a higher rating. He outperformed the WWE for the first time in history, a head-to-head wrestling show. But you're still not winning. As much as you would love to go, I did a 1.8 rating and you did a 1.4. Therefore, I beat you. As much as you would love to do that, when Vince knows what you paid to get the 1.7 versus what he paid to get the 1.4, his spread is bigger than yours. So you can keep on playing this game, you can keep on buying his talent, you can keep on driving your prices up, and you can keep on doing wonderful numbers. Your margins are worse, which means you can only do this for so long. It is one of the arts of war. You build your resources. And when the time came, those resources, that money that Vince didn't have to keep Hogan, to keep Macho, to keep Hebner, to keep Russo, the money he didn't have to keep those guys, he proved he did have. And he used it and bought the whole goddamn company. And it's one of those situations where if you believe that you're outspending and that's going to get to victory, I would ask you historically, what example do you suggest where that happened? And not only did Vince lose all of his talent, but when he lost his talent, then he was forced to scramble. Right? So the WCW is coming and taking his biggest stars that he didn't want to see go. His biggest stars who he was offering money to as well. They went head-to-head negotiations and he lost them. Vince did the opposite. Vince was having to take leftovers of WCW. Not when their athletes' contracts came up and they went head-to-head and Vince One, guys that they released that they did not want. They didn't care where they went. They released them. That's who Vince had to bring over. And then Vince got creative, and Vince did what a promoter does, which is he builds from the ground up if he's a good promoter. And he got a guy that WCW disrespected so much they didn't even call him to fire him. They didn't do it face-to-face. They didn't even do it verbally. The guy opened up a FedEx one day, and the slip is pink. The guy's name is Stunning Steve. You might know him as the Ringmaster. You might know him as a Hollywood Blonde. You more likely know him as the Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then Vince, not knowing what to do. The NWO has been formed. It's formed with his talent. What is he going to do? But he had a football player who had a lineage, who'd been in wrestling, and his dad had wrestled and his uncles wrestled. His name was Rocky Maivia. And they changed that to The Rock. So when Vince came in with the two biggest names that you've ever heard of in wrestling, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, and he did it at the same time, he did it on a shoestring of a budget compared to the competitor. But he understood, I don't have to have the best wrestlers. I just have to have the best. And it was a different word. He advertised that he had the best wrestlers. He claimed he had the best wrestlers, but privately, when it's decision-making time, he knew he had to have the best stories. The best characters. The best interviews. The best walkout songs. He never actually thought he had to have the best wrestlers, but he said it. He told everybody. So when his competitors came in, his competitors thought, I know what I have to do because I've heard you the best. I've heard you, the king, say it 1,000,000 times. They went and they did it to the point that they overspent, and they did it with misinformation that they thought was true. And it was just it's a very interesting concept. To always remember, no matter how big the fight, no matter how big the gate, no matter how many t-shirts and how many cups of beer you sell, the win isn't in outdoing your competition in those things. It's outdoing your competition in the margin. What did it cost you to do your business? What did it cost your competition to do their business? And as I sit back and I analyze, I like what I hear. I like what I see. I like nuances. But if I'm sitting down to make a prediction of who's going to come out on top, the first thing I have to do is to figure out, can I follow what he does, or do I have to follow what he says? Because the greats, I can ignore what they say. I can just watch what they do.